All right,
Yeah.
we're back.
Hiccup, we're back.
Yeah,
we were just rolling. We were getting into this.
We were on a roll. We're ready to go. But we've got a great summary of why Web 4.0, the secrets of Web 4.0, and the things that are happening in the world today that really we started predicting and working on years ago. And that's why it's so exciting for us to actually see this, but also concerning when you look at the way the story's being told from the other side back to business as usual. So that's what we're going to talk about today as we lead into our big launch of version 4.0 that's happening next week. But Dan, I think run that video again. Let's see. Let's let the world see what the summary is of why we should all be thinking Web 4.0 and no more business as usual.
Okay, let's do it. Trying to get the video keyed up here. Here we go. Wow, and you don't think you need another internet? We're still using our parents' internet of the late 1990s, 2000s, and it's just amazing to see what is happening in today's world, and we've just gotten used to it, Tim. And you're unmute there, Tim.
Great. Okay. I think I was going to say, I think that's the whole point, Dan, which is, you know, it's so easy for us to just be back into that business as usual mindset. And what we've got to be aware of is it wasn't that great. Like there was a lot of stupid stuff and waste and inefficiency and everything that we solved during the lockdowns and the pandemic and then we had this meteoric rise of security breaches and so forth. And we all gained this new perspective and this new knowledge, or we should have. And all of a sudden we come back to, oh, well, let's do big events again. Let's everybody jump on and start traveling around. And, you know, that was all just kind of a blip in the universe. No, it wasn't. It was the universe's message to us that something needs to change.
Right. And does it make sense to, I was reading statistics, does it make sense to go back to an average of 40 hours or 40 minutes a day of commute time, which I also saw statistics of that costing employees about $500 a month in just commute time, the amount of time that we spend away from our families, but also away from working. Also, statistics say that people, from the most part, say they're more productive and they work more hours from home. And they also have that work-life balance. So lots of different things we'll talk about here.
Well, and then, you know, so when we get into that, and let's just go. And I think that what I want everybody out there to understand is we're giving you a foundation of what we're going to launch and give you in the form of links. you can go on today on web on blockcerts.com and download Web 4.0. You can do it today, and we're releasing version 4.0 next week. So let's talk about right now what business as usual is going to do if we just let our minds and our businesses and our lives get controlled by this centralized model. And how many of us actually want that? So in 2021, there was about 47 million Americans who quit their job. But as Harvard says, the Great Resignation didn't start with the pandemic. Look, business as usual stopped. And look at when this chart starts, 2009. What happened in 2008? I mean, we kind of know that that was the beginning of the Great Recession. And it was also when we got the first blockchain app out, which was Bitcoin. So, you know, this idea of no more business as usual has been gaining momentum with people voluntarily leaving their jobs. And for what? For something better, right?
Right.
So the thing about business as usual is Mark Carney, who's the former governor of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada, is now the United Nations envoy for climate action and finance, said in his book, Values, and I love the title of the book, Values, because it is about value. It says, the world is heading for mortality rates equivalent to the COVID crisis every year by mid-century. Okay, think about that. By mid-century, unless action is taken, the answer lies in smarter investment. Mr. Carney said, we cannot retreat. Okay, so what we looked at literally 10 years ago, and then in 2016, when we brought out Blockcer, it says, how can we look at this thing called the internet, this thing called the web, this stuff called software and cloud, and transform it? And not only can we do it, but can we build a company based on it? And if we can do that, can we then give that to the world? That's the secret. The secret is we looked at everything, and we've been looking at it for over a decade. We've put millions of person hours into doing this, and we've done it all with $0 in venture capital, Dan.
Right.
$0 in centralized venture capital, forcing us to take a path of quick ROI, quick in and out, flip, whatever the number is, and also without that thing that keeps users stuck. The sticky customer, monthly recurring revenue, all the things that the VCs look at, we had to throw that out the window to do this. That's secret number one.
Yeah,
right?
and Tim, the one word that just is always in my mind that we always talk about is control.
Right.
Who is in control, or who is controlling whom? And that's really the change here with Web 4.0. And I also think back to prior to when we all introduced the internet back in the late 90s, the World Wide Web, and trying to explain what it was back then, because it's so revolutionary, transformational, etc. What we're talking about with Web 4.0 is that same kind of thing. It's hard to just explain, 5 things. It's a whole new internet, and it's a whole new way of doing business and life. But I'll let you get into it here.
That's right. And so, when we looked at this and we looked at, well, what is it going to be like? I mean, what are we really facing, Dan? What we were looking at is and I had those conversations. Actually, you had a lot of those conversations with me, with the Silicon Valley guys, and they're like, well, what about this? And what about this? And ROI, and how are we going to get there? And I can't tell you how many people said, well, just do that. Just do that piece. That's a business in and of itself. The problem is that if you just did that, you ended up with another app. You ended up with another one source app, and you ended up with another centralized control internet. You didn't change anything.
Right.
And, in 2016, I looked at all of this after doing this for a dozen years before that and said, wait a minute, that's not working. Right. It's not going to work, and it's comforting to look at people out there who are saying it's not going to work. And so let's jump into that. Let's talk about what's really happening and who's saying what. All right. And doing what. So, the first thing is, Dan, look who's talking. And I really think that's the important part of business as usual. Look behind who's talking and look at what they're doing. It's the same old events. It's the same old stories. And you know what? Frankly, it's the same old, pretty much everything.
Right? It is. So it makes me think about
same old promises.
Get back in line, get back in that long line, and get back into the individuals that want you to go business as usual are the ones that want to control everything.
Exactly. And so when we get into that, one of the things that we saw was this idea of the event. And this one struck me in particular about events and the TechCrunch event, which is a big Silicon Valley event happening in October, said the great expectations of crypto and blockchain. The crypto winter has sparked debate about the real world use case of crypto and blockchain. Well, while everybody else is debating and expecting and still telling and discussing the same old stories, the great evolution's already here at Boxer's Web 4.0. We've been working on delivering real world use cases, and it's live. It's there right now. And so it's amazing to me that we got back to this idea of events. We got back to this idea of the way capitalism is. And this guy, John Mackay, he's the co-founder of Whole Foods Market. In 2013 came out with this concept of conscious capitalism. Mackay was a socialist. I don't know how else to say it. He was the guy who didn't ever want to be in business, right? I'm sure he's happy he is now because Amazon bought Whole Foods about 5 years ago for somewhere around $14 billion. But Mackay went on to say, look, you can have capitalism. Capitalism, a good thing. We believe in the heroic spirit of business, but you got to do it right. Okay? Well, the biggest model of capitalism on the planet is technology. And the big firms out there, some of the big firms are talking about that, like McKinsey and Company. What were the implications of COVID for business? This is just in April this year, right? And the implications were this idea of a new critical infrastructure, Web 4.0. And read this down below. It says, after 2 years of reporting on a destructive force, obviously COVID, we look forward to sharing our research and thoughts on people and organizations can build a better world. Not the same world, not going backwards to what we were doing before, a better world. And it speaks to it right here, which is roughly 130 in investment will flood into projects to decarbonize and renew critical infrastructure. Well, what's the most critical infrastructure in the world? Hello?
Yes. I'm sorry, I was typing to the world from here there. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the most critical infrastructure in the world is the web.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the internet.
Makes business go around.
So when we get into that, let's talk about what's going on and like how business was done. And I really think this makes the second point of what Boxerts has done differently, which is the idea of conferences out there. Conferences have this massive cost, but it's not just a financial cost. The average conference will cost a company, a small company, to send 4 people about $15,000 to a conference out of the normal. But if you go to something like the real cost of events, Dreamforce, Salesforce conference started yesterday, and it had 150,000 attendees. Now, what I found interesting, because I watched the whole thing, was that online there were 79 million. So what's the cost of this 150,000 showing up to see some celebrities, right?
Right. Well,
to talk about,
to put that into perspective, I live in Denver, so that's 2 Denver Broncos stadiums full.
Right.
Of people traveling, coming in, going.
Traveling all over the world. So let's talk about the real cost of this event to our world. And let's talk about what would happen if we did a conference with 1,000 people. Right. A conference with 1,000 people will produce about 1,300,000 pounds of CO2 gas. So let's convert that and say, well, what would that be with 150,000 people? That's 187.5 trillion pounds of CO2 gas emitted into the atmosphere to attend this conference with the 150,000. Now remember, 79 million people were listed as watching, and there were something like 150,000 there. 187 trillion pounds of CO2 gas. So what does that really mean in terms of, before we get to that, what that really means in terms of global gas cost, let's talk about, well, what's the behind the scene? Look who's talking, and why are they talking? Right. Well, here's why. So this is the other secret behind transforming the internet. The reason they're talking, and they can do this, is on average, companies spend $2,623 per employee per year on software as a service. They use an average of 8.3 SaaS apps each. So second, the way we did all of this at BlockCerts is we built all that into the blockchain. We built every app. We actually built more than a dozen critical apps for business into one place, and we pay $0 for those apps, and our token holders just use the compute power of the entire blockchain, right? Yeah. So why would you care and why would you go back to business as usual? Look at this. In 2021, it was predicted that on average, a total spend of $2.8 million per company on SaaS would be out there on average. And on 4.16 million for enterprise. So for small companies, $260,000 a year. For mid-sized companies, 2.8 million, and for large companies, 4.16 million. Driving a global market cap of this one company here for 151.5 billion, $58 billion.
It reminds me like Tim, my daughter's little cup here with all my pins here. Each pin represents each company you have to sign into, each company you have to pay for, and it's just crazy. But that's the world we've lived in. But in the future, if you can access any tool you need and just pay for pennies on the dollar when you use it, that's revolutionary.
That's right. So when we get into that, what we end up with, you know what, Dan, I'm going to jump out and jump right back in because my camera's off. So I'll be right back.
Okay. Great. And as Tim leaves us, I'm reading some of the streaming comments here. I know that my commute used to be about 45 minutes each way, and given a snowstorm or something like that, double that. And then I spent about 4 days of each week on the road, traveling on airplanes, et cetera. I can't imagine my carbon footprint in the past doing business the old way versus also the productivity that I have just now versus what I used to have in the past. So pretty phenomenal if you're able to do things differently across the globe, and especially with our company going green many years ago, about 6 years ago, how we're able to get massive productivity gains from everyone across the world, across 5 different continents. So pretty amazing what we're able to do, and can't wait to share what we're going to do next week as we kick off the World Wide Web of Internet 4.0. So pretty exciting stuff that we have coming up here. And I'm not sure why the technical difficulties today, but as my daughter texted me last night talking about all the different planets in retrograde, not to get into some kind of hooey thing, but here we go. Got Tim back here as well.
So when we get, I don't know what you were saying, but I'm sure it was good.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
We hear about this. We hear about this idea of, come back. It's our big reunion. Welcome back and everything. But what we're actually doing is we're generating this huge global footprint or problem with the climate. Now, what struck me about that is this. If you look at what MIT says about how big a ton of carbon emissions is, imagine a cube, 27 feet by 27 feet by 27 feet. Okay? That is how big it is. That is equivalent to it actually is a weight of a ton. It is a weight of a ton of bricks. Okay? Right. So a ton of bricks is 400 bricks. It is the size of a great white shark.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, or even bigger. I think of a football field of 7 yards on a football field. And
so that is the equivalent of taking a 10-story brick building,
right,
building it for this conference, and then destroying it and asking the atmosphere to absorb that. The CEO of Salesforce said, we have a mission to plant 1 trillion trees by 2035, and I'm convinced we're going to get there. It would take a tree, according to the Arbor Society, a tree absorbs 48 pounds of CO2 gas a year. So if you take and do the math, you would have to plant 3.5 trillion trees today to absorb the carbon footprint of this event.
Not 13 years into the future.
Okay. So our secret was, and my secret that just struck me 10 years ago was, why am I traveling all over the planet and going to all these events, right? They're expensive. Right. Forget about it. If you don't care about the environment, care about your bottom line. They're expensive. Number two, you reach a lot more people by doing digital. And if there's a good reason to get there, go do it. If you don't care about the environment, care about your cost, care about your productivity, care about your bottom line. And you're seeing it right now. We're doing this on the blockchain. Like Meet Certain was built because we realized that's a huge waste. It's not only just a waste for the planet and for what we do on the planet and our work, it's a waste of productivity. I'm gonna post a whole bunch of links through our blog. This is all gonna be put in a blog as we lead up to our version 4.0 laws. and launch. And what I would like everybody to be able to do is go look at the loss calculator of meetings that Harvard came out with. You can use it right online. Just put the number of people in, what you pay them, and it will calculate how much these things are costing you. All right. So this has been around for a long time. We talked about all of this like carbon footprint, and that's called greenwashing. Okay. When companies are out there saying, we're going to do all of this, we're going to do all these great things, but are they really benefiting the planet, or is it marketing shtick?
Right.
Right.
Right. Because carbon, once it's emitted, it's not like it just goes away.
That's right. Well, and we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah.
But so when I'm watching this, I'm like, okay, well, here's this event. I got 150,000 people there, and they start talking about how eco-friendly the company is. Well, guess who doesn't like this idea of greenwashing? And this was published back in June. There is now little doubt the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission means business in its bid to crack down on environment, social, and governance fund managers. In other words, no, you can't just say it. You have to put some numbers behind it.
Right.
So Web 4.0, getting back to what we're releasing and what we built at BlockSearch, is about some very practical stuff. It's about building something so we could scale. We're going to give that to the world. It's about building something so you can control this and you can run a smarter business, right? You can run a smarter life. You can run data privacy. And we talk about all these things, Dan. We've been talking about them for a long time. I'm not sure people quite get the implication overall, right? And that's why I wanted to do today's World from Here on an overall kind of foundation of what things like costs, and look who's talking about why they're telling you these stories, making the same old promises, and then, what does carbon footprint mean in reality? It means people traveling, getting hotels, food waste, going from their hotel to the convention center. I mean, all this stuff. You're just pumping it up there. And then finally, Dan, we talked about privacy. So there's another secret. Like, we looked at, well, what the heck? I mean, we all found out in 2016 what Facebook was doing with our data, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, and then in 2020, I wrote an article for Forbes about the big black box of data. I actually wrote that article before the pandemic.
Wow.
It got published in March of 2020, right when the pandemic hit. Probably wasn't top headlines at that time, but it's there. And so what about this idea of, if we don't care about our costs, go to conferences. If we don't care about our environment, go to conferences, do business as usual. If we don't care about those two things, then let's think about data. Let's just think about data, okay? And why blockchain and tokens and everything are so important in a cloud to change data. And let's just look at what Salesforce talked about yesterday in their data. They're telling all of their people that they have Hyperforce, data residency, scalability, security, privacy, agility. Okay, that's their cloud. That's the cloud right there. All right. So all in one place. What does that one place thing get us? Let's have a look. It gets us this idea of data that tracks us. So this is hard to read, but this is a screen of everything about Sophia Turisky. What her activity is. That's coming from your watch. What your climate do you live in? What category do you shop in? What color do you like? View all. What color are you? What's your email address, your phone number, your address? What segment? High propensity to buy. Lifetime value of the customer. 3,882.26, Sophia, and counting. Engagement score, highly engaged. If I know enough about you and I get enough data and I get into your head enough with all of my emails, my mobile apps, my websites, and the pop-ups at your in-store purchases for coupons, I've got an 84% chance of selling to you.
Creepy.
Well, this is just a highlight.
I know. That's not even digging in.
Look at this. Okay, so the question is, that's a screen. Look at how they're doing it. They're taking all of this centralized data, right? And they are doing sales, service, marketing, commerce, Tableau, which is their analytics platform that they bought for, I think, 16 billion. MuleSoft, I can't remember, 6 or 7 billion, might have been more than that, which is an API software. Slack, 27 billion, that's their communications. And they take all of that, build it up here, and they've created what they call AI, an AI system called Genie. Well, guess what? Genie's out of the bottle, and this is what it's doing to you as a customer. Sure, if you're a business, who doesn't want an 84% close ratio?
Right.
Right? But are your customers going to trust you once they find out that's what you're doing with their data?
Right. And do you want to be tracked like that as a customer
do your customers want to be tracked like that? Right? Do you want to be tracked like that? That is business as usual. It sounds very, very enticing. The ecopreneur revolution sounds very enticing. It's a great story. It's a great promise. But what are you giving up?
Right. You're giving up privacy. You're giving up much of who you are. And I heard the internet knows more about you than you know about yourself, in a couple different
conferences. It actually does. Really true. So once we create, and what we're giving the world next week in version 4.0 is a domain where you control all your data. So we've given you already a browser and we'll show you next week how to set that. I'm going to show you how to set it up. We've given you all of your private keys to control all of your software. We've given you all of your meeting tools, so you don't really I don't have to travel at all anymore. I'm very proud of my carbon footprint over the last 2.5, 3 years. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Right.
And your productivity and
my productivity is through the roof.
Yeah.
My family, my productivity. I even get a chance to work in the garden like you.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
I built an Overlander, for God's sakes, out of my old Land Rover.
Right.
It's really cool. I'm going to show it on World from Here. Okay, so if you don't care about the environment, you don't care about your cost expenses, you don't care about your privacy, then we thought, well, maybe people care about their data. Why should you care about your data? Well, let's assume you don't even care about your privacy or your customer's privacy, or who's going to serve it up in a way that maybe if your customer found out they wouldn't like, or maybe if you found out you wouldn't like, maybe. Right. I don't know. I wouldn't. But okay, so what is the value of data? Let's look at it. The value of data is this. And this is the real secret number 4 about data, Dan, is data is highly valuable. In just the manufacturing sector alone, the estimated value of data in 2020 was $100 billion US.
Wow.
So here's the secret about Sophia. Here's the secret for every business, which is Sophia and each business can own their own data. And with NFT certain that we brought out, and with blockchain, they can lock and unlock that data and monetize it. Just like you've seen digital artwork, which is actually just data,
right?
Monetized, you can do that on the Blocksearch blockchain with NFTs and the proper structure set up. You actually get rewarded for your data. Not only that, you have insight. You have, instead of the company having the insight into your data, you as the data owner has the insight into your data.
Yeah, and the key point also, Tim, is you have control, and you're the one that is able to make that choice, because
That's right.
maybe I go online and I want to be tracked to look at backpacks or something like that, and have
I love that tracking.
Yeah, have other items, click up and everything, because it's something that I'm interested in, and I don't care if somebody reviews that.
That's right.
Other things, I want to keep private. So
and I do that.
Things.
That's my secret. Every day I do that now with my Orbit Eye browser.
Yeah.
Google knows who I am sometimes, and sometimes they don't.
Right.
And my customers know who I am and where I am sometimes. I actually tweeted from my boat using Starlink.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't.
Right.
So I control whether I'm on or off the grid. I control whether or not what my profile is, who my profile is, and so can everybody else. When you have your own cloud and your own blockchain-based environment, you can do that. The reason you can do that is because of a thing called redaction. You can take that data and you can share what you like, and you can put a black line through what you don't want somebody to see. A technique that attorneys, I know very well, love to use when they're required to disclose emails.
Yeah.
And you can fight a 7-year legal battle at making them disclose that, because guess what? A judge won't look at it if it's redacted. It's not admitted into evidence, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so we won't talk about how I know that all too well about how the story is told, but it's back to that. Look who's talking and the way that they're captioning these stories they're telling. Okay.
Right.
So let's get back into, the value of data. So who found out the hard way about the value of data? These guys did. They found out about it in 2016. They found out about it again in 2022. They found out that data is a highly valuable thing. So secret number 4, if you don't care about the first 3 things, care about your data. It's a bottom line. It's an asset. It's a huge asset worth trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. How much in trillions, Dan? You pointed this one out.
I
this
did.
Much.
Yeah, 10.5 trillion by 2025. Yeah. And what's amazing to that is look at the growth from 3 trillion of 2015, 6 trillion last year to, it's just exponential. It's doubling in just 4 years.
And that's why we say we said in our video that, 33% of US citizens have their identities at risk or hacked already.
Right.
But 100% are being tracked. Right?
Right.
So what is the value of data? Trillions.
Yeah.
So if you're going to grow the value of your business on the internet and what you do on the internet, think about it from a perspective of just what can I do with data, right?
Well, and to that point, Tim, do you want to control your customers' data or do you want somebody else to? And that's a huge thing for what you were just talking about with Salesforce or others, is that even if you have a business and you think you're in control of your data, of your customers' data, it's really the centralized entity above you that's in control of that data. You really don't have control.
So it comes back to that bottom line of who is holding the cards, right? Who's holding all the cards? And that's secret number 5. Secret number 5 was when we went out in early 2016, and it's been a long, hard road to build this. Yep. And the constituencies out there who own, we've talked about this for years now, who own all the real estate, who own all the licenses, who own all the software, who own all the data, they don't want this, right?
Right.
The monetization models. In fact, I had a giant tech company we were talking to, you were on the phone. One of the upper level guys said, Tim, how do you monetize that? I said, John, why would I tell you that?
Exactly.
You know?
Secret to
Why
be
would I
held.
tell you that? I'm going to tell the world that, how they monetize it, how you get rewards, how you put it out there. And that's what secret number 5 is. We're giving this cloud to the world. We've created a cloud anybody can access that through a token, a simple token, as little as $10, like nobody's really excluded. $10 is just a little over 80 cents a month. So anywhere in the world, you can do this. And the global cloud community with one common vision and true ESG, environment, social, and governance, right? That solves, as Mr. Carney said, 3 of the biggest problems in the world. Leverages what we learned from COVID, helps solve climate. If you care about it, you're there. And credit, the credit and the finance and all the things that keep our economy going. COVID, credit, climate, that's what he said the 3 biggest crises are. I think he's probably a pretty smart guy. You know, Governor Bank of England, Governor Bank of Canada, and now UN envoy. I read the book. I think it's a great book. Point is that book came out now. We started this at Block Certs several million person hours ago and over a decade ago, Dan. And so next week is super exciting for me because we're going to launch at 9:30 PST web or version 4.0 of our Web 4.0 platform, which puts all of it together and we hope makes it super easy for pretty much anybody to jump on board.
Yeah. And you and I talked this week about it being the infinite circle. It's everything needed for the last internet, as you've said, the last internet that you'll ever need, where you have control. Yeah. Well,
I would actually go one step further, and this is my cliffhanger for the week.
Okay.
Web 4.0 is the last web.
Yeah.
The next version will not be the internet. Think about that for a minute. It will not be the internet that we got to this point. So there's a great author I like, and Marshall Goldstein, and he said, "What got you here won't get you there." Right. Well, if you want to get there, come along. We're ready to go. We're ready to take you there. Next week, we're going to show you that 9:30. Stay tuned. We'll be right here, and we will give you all of the links you need to start creating a better world, a better future, your future, and you're going to be in ownership of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. I'm so excited because I know what's under the hood, and there's a lot to be shared here next week, and the whole company's excited. It's many, many years that have come into one day to announce this and get started.
That's right.
And as I think a few weeks ago, I was with my daughter and she ordered a Starbucks, and it was about $7 for this Starbucks cup of coffee. I'm like, oh my God, that's almost a token that allows you to have blockchain in a box, the whole Web 4.0. It's pretty amazing.
We can offer the whole cloud for us. You know, skip a Starbucks this week, get a cloud.
Exactly.
Go to token.blockcerts.com. This is our last version 3.0 token that will be out there. Everything's changing next week. So if you want to get involved and you still want to get those bonus tokens and have more of this in the future, that's the place to go right now.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you, Tim. If you haven't done so, please subscribe. Click on the thumbs up button. We appreciate you, and the channel continues to grow. And we look forward to being with you again next week. Lots of things to share.
Stay green, stay smart, get on 4.0. Have a great weekend, everybody.
See you, everybody.